You're listening to a new episode of The Brave Technologist, and this one features a guest we previously had on the podcast, Hester M. Peirce, who is the commissioner at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, appointed by Donald Trump and sworn in on January 11, 2018. Earlier this year, Commissioner Peirce has been designated as the leader of the SEC's crypto task force. In this episode, we discussed her new role in leading a charge on the crypto task force at the SEC, their top priorities, and how she'll measure success of the task force, what a healthy and regulated crypto market in the U.S. could look like, and what this could mean for the industry, and how the SEC is providing input for lawmakers on regulations and taking feedback from players in the industry. Now for this week's episode of The Brave Technologist. Commissioner, welcome back to The Brave Technologist. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Luke. Thanks for having me back. And as you know, I'm going to start with my disclaimer, which is that my views are my own views as a commissioner, not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners.
Excellent. I really appreciate you kind of taking the time to come back to the podcast. I feel like so much has changed since the last time we were on. I mean, even it's just completely, a new day as far as things go. It certainly impacted us in a positive way. I'm kind of curious, what surprised you most in how the crypto landscape or perception in DC has evolved over the past year?
Well, I think like a lot of people who have been following crypto policy for a long time, I'm just, pleasantly surprised that there's been a real willingness to take a new approach. And so while I expected that to happen, because that was something that President Trump had said was an agenda item for him, it's just really nice to see it actually playing out. Having Chairman Atkins at the SEC, I think a lot of people saw his recent speech. It really does just confirm the amount of work that has to be done, but also the amount of energy that there is behind getting that work done. So that's just been a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see just how huge of a course change there's been. I feel like in our last discussion, I was even a little guarded in what I would ask a little bit more, but now it feels like a whole new season. I mean, in a whole new environment for, us to start experimenting and finding market fit again, which is great. I mean, but so much of this too has to deal with the leadership style and kind of the approach. How does your approach shift now that you're leading a charge with this commission at the SEC? We can dive into that too, but how have you shifted things in your approach and in your leadership style with these new areas that you're in?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to pause on something you said, which is giving us a chance to experiment and find market fit, because that really is the thing that hasn't been allowed to happen in the way that it normally organically would. And so I think that's really important for us to emphasize, is that is the goal of what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to, as regulators, decide where the market will go, what the market will decide is the right way to do things, whether we'll have a completely decentralized future or whether there'll be centralized entities but decentralization alongside. And so this is really the moment where I want people to be able to figure out in a way that is consistent with both the securities laws, but also with their need to reach commercial viability, that they can really experiment and try things. And so that really does, I think, set the tone really well for how I'm thinking about things. In terms of leadership style, I'm happy to be here on the commission still at a time when we can make some positive changes. I've had a lot of ideas over the years about things that we could be doing, and we've been able to do some of those, whether it's providing some guidance around certain things that maybe don't fit within the securities laws, but also working with people to try to figure out what kind of exemptive relief, what kind of no action letters, what kind of longer term rulemaking would be useful for them. And certainly because this is a commission, Chairman Atkins sets the agenda, and so working with him has been really delightful as well. He's been very open to trying to figure out concrete solutions for problems, and so it's still a collaborative leadership style. Although I am leading the crypto task force, I'm working closely with him and my fellow commissioners as well.
Yeah, maybe we can dive into that a little bit, specifically around the task force. For folks that may not have been following specifically, like what are the goals of the task force? What are you trying to do with the task force, and how do you kind of plan to measure success with that?
Yeah, the task force was stood up by then acting chairman Ueda, really as one of his first acts as chairman, and the goal was to try to do a 180 in terms of how we think about things. So we used to think about things very much through an enforcement lens. What enforcement actions can we bring so we bring this industry to heel was sort of the approach. And now the approach is really to say, look, there have been consistent questions about how the law interacts with the crypto landscape. So let's provide some answers to those questions, and let's not lead with enforcement. Now, I think it's really important to emphasize, too, that part of the goal here is to get to a place where the rules are clear, and there will be enforcement of those clear rules. This is not like a season where anyone can do anything. Even in the interim, as we work on these rules, people do need to be careful. We urge people to come in and talk to us, because it's not an anything goes time. The task force is made up mostly of people who are already on the SEC staff. We brought in a couple people from the outside, but it really is mostly SEC staff. And we're working with staff across the building. And it's been really a delightful. I mean, you asked about surprises. I think one of the really wonderful things, and I knew we had a wonderful staff, but one of the really nice things has been to see how hard they're willing to work and how creatively they've been thinking about trying to get us to a better place. There was a lot of pent up creativity, I think, that now has been unleashed at the SEC. So we're working with staff across the agency, and the goal is to get some, as I said, some early guidance. We've been able to get some of that out the door, and then we're working longer term toward rulemaking. And so I think how we measure success is if we can get some of those rules finalized, so we can get a framework that people can really hang their hat on, and know that it's a stable framework that they can rely on. And I always think one measure of success is that people like you won't want to have me on their podcasts anymore, because we won't all be talking about regulation all the time. The regulation will be clear. You'll operate within that regulatory framework, but you'll have people on your podcast to talk about building interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, first off, it's always great talking to you on the podcast. So I even in an informal way, but I think, one of the things that was really exciting about seeing the track of progress that's happened over this past year is I just remember reading the dissent positions that you had like in the past, and it was almost like there was a lot of roadmap framework potentially in those positions, and like how we could be doing things and all of that. And so seeing how the environment's changed, it's been, I don't know, it's hard not to get cynical around DC and the political scene and regulation and all of that. But like, this is actually one case where things are actually like, it's been really positive. And I know for us, we've been able to dust off things that we had put a lot of time into, but had to shelve for various reasons. And I think that your point about it not just being like an open season or freewheeling or whatever, I think it's a good one too, because in the past environment, it was like, I think most projects want people to be protected and want to do the right thing. And it felt like in the past, we couldn't even approach about the wrong things that were happening, right? So I think it's really cool to see that now there's like, you can actually have a discourse and focus on some of the things that need enforcement, because, I think that's another thing that's really kind of difficult in this industry from perception, is that, the scams sometimes get all the attention, and what we're seeing now with adoption is it's much more a tech upgrade. But
yeah, and I mean the problem is in the past, I think it's been easier to be an in and out scammer, right? You come, you dump a bunch of tokens, and you run away, because then there's a smaller window within which you felt that you were potentially going to be a target of an SEC or some other agency action. And I mean, that's ridiculous, right? We want people who want to come and be there and build things. And so a clear regulatory environment actually makes it less easy I think the talent is more likely to flow to the valuable things and less likely to, and the talent and the money are less likely to flow to the scams, I hope. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people out there trying to do bad things, and that will, I guess that's a condition of humanity, right? So that's something that we're always going to have an enforcement division here at the SEC. But also, I think it's important to note that as we provide some clarity around where the lines lie, there will be some things that are not within the Securities and Exchange Commission's ambit. And that means that we may be referring things to other agencies, or you all may be referring things elsewhere, not to the SEC. We are not the enforcer of all things. But it also just underscores the importance of the industry watching out what's going on and identifying. And I think that's one of the really nice things about this industry. You know, it's got a very active presence on all sorts of social media channels. And I think calling things out in those kind of formats can be helpful too, because it really does remind people that you still have to be skeptical of everything. You still have to think before you put your money in something. And I think a lot of that can be grassroots and doesn't have to be government. Government has a role to play, but so does the industry.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, it's kind of speaking about like clear regulatory lines. You know, we're seeing things like the Genius Act passing and things like the Clarity Act upcoming, or I guess it's in the middle of process now, which does seem to kind of address the different types of assets and which agencies are handling which types, right? Is that fair? And is the SEC, is your commission or task force like helping to inform Congress in that policymaking process? Can you give us a little bit of a sense of the input on those types of things?
Yeah, we do get asked by Congress for feedback on drafts of legislation. And so we have been helpful there. We've got a lot of expertise that we can sort of help them think through what the legislation might look like in practice if they adopted it. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's Congress's decision what that looks like. But it has been a really interesting time. I mean, with seeing the Genius Act pass so that stablecoins have a regulatory framework, as you said, much of that is going to be at the bank regulators, not here at the SEC, although we do, I think, have a role to play as well in working with the entities we regulate and thinking about how, as they undoubtedly will want to, how they integrate stablecoins into their products and service offerings. So we'll be doing some of that. But yes, we absolutely work with Congress.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I've seen some of this on social, but I'd be really curious to hear direct to like, have you all seen a big uptick in projects coming and engaging with the SEC in this new administration or this new year or whatever, like compared to the past?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. People have been willing to come in who weren't willing to come in before. I think there is still, I mean, the level of just problems that was caused by the approach we took before, that does take some time to heal that, right, and to build trust again. So I think one of the things that we tried to do early on is communicate that we really do want to talk to people. We held a series of public roundtables. We just announced that we will be doing some on-the-road roundtables. I travel in relation to my job, and so in conjunction with those trips, I'll be meeting with, and what we've called for is small, early-stage crypto projects. So I'll be meeting with representatives from those projects, the kinds of people who are less likely to be able to come to DC to meet with us. Mm-hmm. We are obviously always willing to do virtual meetings, so that's an option too. But I think some face-to-face conversations and usually getting a group of people together from different projects is a really nice way for me to hear what the consistent themes are across those projects of what they need from us. Of course, there may be specific no action letters or exemptive relief that some projects need, but sometimes it's just something basic that they need that all projects need. So I'm hoping we'll get some of that feedback as well. And I'm hoping that will also, again, send the message that we really do want to talk to people, and that it is a new opportunity to have that kind of conversation. I think that the chairman's speech also sent that message that he really does want to see projects and companies in the crypto industry coming here to the U.S. and doing things in the U.S., knowing that the regulator, while we're still going to regulate, we are going to do it in a way that hears from the industry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit in the last discussion, where ultimately, the government's working for the people too, and so like including people working at the projects, and we all want to win at the end of the day and have good business and all of that. So that's excellent. And I'm really curious too. One of the interesting takeaways from our last discussion is I had several people reaching out to me after the fact that were almost as surprised as I was when they heard that one of the difficulties in regulating this space was the inability to actually touch the software, use the things, like where that barrier is there. Has any of that changed in the time between our last discussion and now, or are there plans to kind of like give more access to the regulators to experiment with these things directly?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, that is one thing that has not changed, and mm-hmm. I hope that it will. And I think that as crypto touches more pieces of our lives, it will become harder to maintain a position that you really can't have any interaction with it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it hasn't changed, and I think that really is it really does make it harder for me to do my job. And mm-hmm. There obviously, I wouldn't want to hold a lot of any crypto asset that would create conflicts for me. So that's not something that I would do. But I would love to just be able to get a sense of how it feels to experiment with some of this stuff.
Of course, right? Like, I mean, I think everybody's dealt with a lot of the other instruments out there and other parts of the market too. So it would make sense. I think also where has your vision changed for how the U.S. can take more of a lead in these markets with the change in administration, or without falling behind and stifling innovation, or what's your, has any of that changed, or are things just kind of, or are you like kind of more of like, now we have some room, let's run the playbook kind of from your point of view?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that has changed is that because people around the world are seeing, the U.S. is actually looking to come up with a practical, pragmatic framework. People are waiting to see what that looks like. And I think they want to, I think we'll have a chance to lead in the sense that if we come up with sensible regulation, I think others might follow suit. And that will address some of the concerns that people have had about, what do we do? This is a very international industry, and so how is it going to work to cross borders? Now, that's not to say everything is going to be smooth sailing, but I mm-hmm. think certainly there's much more of a willingness for people outside the U.S. to say, hey, let's see what's happening over there, and maybe we'll follow.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it certainly seems like, the banking industry, finance, all that's done a complete change of tune and are actually starting to adopt these things too. So, I mean, this whole new emergence, I did a whole whole podcast about like tokenized finance and how people are getting exposure to a lot of these investment vehicles without directly holding the assets themselves. It just seems like every time it's almost like, every time you kind of open a new layer and layer upon layer of complexity or technology with these things, is your team kind of keeping up to date or following along or even engaging with any of these tokenized finance efforts, or is it is it too early, or what's your take on that?
I mean, I think one of the things that we really heard very early on was that there was real interest in tokenizing all kinds of things, tokenizing real world assets, including traditional securities. And so that's something that it's one of the pieces that we're working on to try to figure out what that looks like. You can take a security and tokenize it, and there are different ways to do that. And so it's still going to be a security. It might have different properties depending on how you tokenize it. And that really does matter for regulation. So people need to really think about this. And we urge people to come talk to us about it. We are trying to facilitate experimentation in this area. We're open to different kind of models, but it really does help if people come talk to us first, because there are investor protection considerations that people have to take into account, disclosure issues, and obviously technical and operational issues as well. And so these are all things we're paying attention to. I mean, I think it will be interesting to see how the market embraces tokenization. Certainly, early signs are that they are, but we'll have to see whether that actually takes off, whether it gets commercial viability. Right. There are advantages that can come from having everything on chain. It makes certain things easier. It's easier to move assets. It's easier to use assets as collateral if they're on chain. So of course, programming them is really a powerful concept. So these are things that we're watching. But again, there are some difficult legal issues to work through, which we are doing.
I can imagine. I mean, because each one of these, pieces of technology is kind of like unlocking more global access to something that's in a certain market jurisdiction, right? Like I know just from the scam side, we see this where it's like, even if you want to enforce things, sometimes just the jurisdictional barriers are very hard to actually get an outcome from that that's like, meaningful or has any kind of accountability. So I would imagine, there's a lot of wait and see, watch, and kind of figuring out how to maybe work with partners in other jurisdictions too. I would imagine on the enforcement side, but
it's something that we do. We've done that in traditional securities as well. We work with our counterparts. I do think that there's some possibility to also work with them on facilitating some cross-border experiments. It's something I've talked about, a cross-border sandbox type approach that would allow someone who wants to launch into jurisdictions to do that at the same time. So that's if people have ideas there, we're open to those conversations as well.
How much is AI kind of in your focus or in your visibility these days? At the SEC, is it still too early? Are you all kind of looking into that area too, outside of crypto, and are you seeing crossover between the two?
Well, certainly not too early. I think in some sense, we all should have been working on this a long time ago, right? Because it has the potential to make us a more effective regulator. And it also has the potential for the entities that we regulate to serve their customers better. There are risks, as with any new technology. I mean, AI is not new, but the formulations that we're seeing now, the way it's being used and its power, those are new things. So there are always going to be risks that go along with that too. But I think it's very important for us to work with the industry to figure out how they can use it for good, and then for us to use it as well. I think there are lots of interactions between crypto and AI, and those are, I think that's a piece of the world that I need to understand better. I have to invest some time in learning about how AI agents and DeFi interact with one another, for example. So I'm going to be working on that.
It's still pretty early too, on that part, at least. I think we're still trying to kind of like get a grips of all of it. There's so much hype versus actual functionality at this point, and lots of interesting things there. But it does. There's like a lot of overlap between these worlds, and I've talked to like AI safety experts and all sorts of other folks. There is something that's kind of disarming about this form, the form factor with these prompts, where people feel much more comfortable or put their guard down a bit, and protections are going to be like super important, but it's still too early to kind of like know exactly how to approach that. But it's a fascinating time right now. I think. Looking outward, though, like if we were to fast forward,
can I just pause for a second?
Yeah, please do.
The other thing that we obviously are concerned about at the SEC is that people have been using AI to very bad effect to scam people. So scammers, one thing I've noticed over my time here at the commission is that the amount of time and energy people put into scamming other people, if they just put it into legitimate activity, it would be amazing what they could produce. But now AI makes it so easy. And so I just really do caution people to be so careful, because there's a lot of bad activity there. And it can look much more realistic now that people are using AI to produce their scam documents.
Oh, definitely. I think that's great. Great point. And yeah, I mean, and even looking out into the future too, like 5 years, if we were to fast forward, what does a healthy, kind of well-regulated crypto market in the U.S. look like to you?
Well, I think it is a market in which people understand which regulatory jurisdiction or jurisdictions they fall into, and they understand, okay, if I'm doing a securities offering that involves crypto, this is the kind of disclosure I need to make. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a world in which trading platforms are functioning in a way that is not conducive to manipulation, and that is brings the consumer protections that are necessary and the disclosures that are necessary around any conflicts that exist. So I guess it's kind of what you would expect from regulation, that it's a marketplace in which people can step into the marketplace and have confidence that they are that there is protection for them, but they're also continuing. I mean, my idea of a good regulatory scheme is that people are still exercising their own skepticism and judgment and making independent decisions. So not that people are relying entirely on regulation to solve every problem out there.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think your point earlier in the conversation too, of just like in an ideal world, crypto founders aren't having to necessarily be prodding the regulator so much, or that we've got a lot of these things sorted out, right? Like, and yeah, I think that those are great goals.
And that they can still come in and talk to us when they have a bespoke problem that they need to solve, and that it can be a good discussion, but that it's just not something that they have to. The thing that has made me very sad over the years is that I've had a lot of people say to me, we structured our project this way because we wanted to avoid the securities laws, even though it would have been better if we could have done it this other way. So I hope that will change too, that if people want to do something that involves a securities component, great, there'll be a way for them to do that.
No, I think that's great. I mean, it has been, it has been difficult in the space. And I think though that, even what we're seeing now is just like such a positive signal for people building that, I just encourage you all to keep it up. And again, too, like I can't say enough how much I appreciate, your leadership in this space and being that dissenting voice, like, during the really tough times. And it's exciting seeing what's happening now, and being able to kind of like have an environment where we can, actually try to get market fit with what we're doing, and really grateful for you making the time to come back here too and talk to us. Is there anything we didn't cover that you might want people to know about that for our audience?
No, well, I mean, I'll give a little plug for crypto@sec.gov. It is our you can email us. There's a web a web page on sec.gov that is Crypto Task Force. There's a lot of great written input there. People can provide written input if they have suggestions for us. I mean, Luke, you said it well. Regulators are supposed to work for the American public. And so we really do want to work for the public in a way that gets regulation right in this space, that makes this world a place where good actors find it easy to build things and bad actors find it really hard to build things.
Fantastic. I can't think of a better way to end this one. Thank you so much, Hester, for making the time again to come on and share all this great insight and progress with the audience. And we're great to see, where this goes and love to have you back on too in the future to kind of check back in.
Thanks, Luke. It's great to be here.
All right. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Brave Technologist podcast. To never miss an episode, make sure you hit follow in your podcast app. If you haven't already made the switch to the Brave browser, you can download it for free today at brave.com and start using Brave Search, which enables you to search the web privately. Brave also shields you from the ads, trackers, and other creepy stuff following you across the web.